I don't know where to get this stuff from. Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano with me now. Okay, they're not going to surrender, but President Trump said this morning they have to surrender. They're going to surrender. What say you?
So the one thing that I'm really watching most closely, which is the most important indicator, is policemen not showing up for work, people not reporting to their military bases, guys running around wearing burqas so they can't be targeted, people fleeing the country, money fleeing the country. This has really started to swell in the last couple of days. Increasing reporting of people in Iran passing targeting information to the U.S. and the Israelis. So look, there's a number of scenarios. The scenario of going back to where we were a year ago with Iran, that's a significant, that's off the table. So right today, if the war stopped today, it would be at least a decade before Iran, if nobody bothered them, could get back to the kind of threat they were to the region a year ago. So that's the worst case scenario. You wind up with a regime that the U.S. accepts, and you get a peaceful transformation. Maybe you get a regime transformation that's kind of ugly, or maybe the whole thing melts down. But those are where it's going. It's not going back to the Iran mullahs being in charge of this country.
Aragachi, the foreign minister there, he's also refusing negotiations. How long can they keep that up?
Well, this is very typical Iranian. We're going to crush the Americans on the battlefield. We're going to sink your battleships. We're not going to negotiate. We see all kinds of contradictory messaging on this because what they say in public is very, very different from what they do in private. And we've heard lots of news reporting about back-channel discussions trying to re-engage with the United States. But look, this is so Trumpian, right? Trump offers you a deal. It's not a bad deal. You don't take the deal. Trump is prepared for the consequences of that, and the deal never gets better. So now the Iranians are basically saying, oh, we want the deal that we refused a couple of weeks ago.
All right.
That's not going to happen. That's just not happening, my friend.
Okay. Forgive me, but I'm changing the subject just a little here. I remember when Democrats mocked the creation of the Space Force, but it's playing a vital role in epic fury. Didn't this turn out to be a good investment? It reminds me of Reagan's Star Wars, actually.
Well, it really just shows how flailing they are in trying to find something to argue about. Look, there was never a debate about whether eventually we were going to have a Space Force, because the space activities were originally under the Air Force. 20 years ago, we started to debate this. And by the way, many of the supporters for a Space Force were actually Democrats. But the question was, when do we get to a tipping point where space operations are so expansive that they've really kind of outgrown the Air Force, the way the Air Force outgrew being part of the Army after World War II. And Donald Trump was right there at the turning point when it became so super obvious that space operations were so significant they had to become a separate service. And what we're actually seeing today is the wisdom of making that rapid transition.
So if I'm a young man and I'm at the West Point, I'm at an officer school or something, I should go to the Space Force as opposed to the other branches of the services, right?
If I were an 18-year-old today, I would be more excited about space, civil or military, than not just any other military activity, almost anything else, any other career choice that you could make. To me, space is the most exciting thing that Americans are doing today.
Yeah, fascinating. I'll leave it at that. James, thank you very much for joining us. See you again soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.